one more time. The thesis statement, a combination of your central idea, what you're talking about, and the main points. In the interest of time, all of you are only going to be using between 2 to 3 main points. And that's why I said you only need to pick out 2 to 3 of those social functions of rhetoric to apply to your artifact. Each of your main points will be one of the functions. So if I wanted to say, again, for you to understand how this artifact of this poster that was made for you to understand how this poster represents the social functions of rhetoric, I'll tell you a little bit about how it creates community and then how it seeks knowledge. So those will be my 2 points. What are my ways that I'm going to tell you? How it, what? Seeks everybody. Community, good, and knowledge, great. So those are the 2 things that I'm going to be building my speech out. So does everybody think that they can write this type of thesis statement, if you will? You don't have to say it the exact same way. I've, of course, written one out for you, but you do not have to say it this way if you wouldn't talk like that. But essentially, this is the formula that you can use in order for you to understand how this artifact fills the definition of rhetoric. I will describe how it builds community, how it assists advocacy, and how it shapes knowledge. So that one we're going to have how many main points? 3! Absolutely, the 3 main points that we'll be talking about. Great. When we are delivering this, we also need to remind ourselves that we can't just jump into that first main point. Our audience needs to be led very clearly on the journey with us. They do not have a piece of paper in front of them. So we need to guide them as to where they're going. That's what these transitions do. They allow your audience, or in the case of writing, your reader, to know that you are switching ideas. And there's a couple things that we, in public speaking, have to use to make sure they know we're switching ideas. So it's a little bit different from writing, and let me show you the couple ways. The first thing that you must use, every transition must have 3 elements, as it states here. The first element that it must have is a signpost. If you think about driving every day on the street, you come across many different types of signposts. Stop, yield, a speed limit. Each of these things allows a driver to know what is going to happen next. The same thing we do in speaking so that our audience gets an indicator as to what is happening. So we can use signposts such as first, second, third, to begin, next, finally. And these signposts let us know that we're switching. To begin, oh, I guess this speech is beginning. Next, oh, we're moving on from that last idea. Finally, this thing is coming to a close. We can let our audience know with these words. The other thing that you need to do is you need to mention the central idea. What is the central idea? Let's go back to it. For you to understand how this fulfills the description of social rhetoric, we need to add that in. Why do we need to add that in? Because somebody could walk in during a presentation and be totally confused on what we're doing. These transitions allow for a reminder as to what this speech is actually about. Why is this person talking about knowledge? Knowledge? That doesn't make any sense. What is this about again? It'll ground the concepts and the ideas. And the last thing that you need to include in your transition is the main, it's right here, a preview and or summary of the next point. Absolutely. We can say something like, first, I'm going to tell you about how this photograph builds community, main point. So you can see how it fulfills the definition of, everybody? Social rhetoric. Then we could do something called like a summary and or preview, even if we wanted to, as a transition. I told you a little bit about building community. Next, signpost, I'd like to tell you about how it shapes knowledge so that you can understand how this artifact, everybody, fulfills the definition of social rhetoric. Good job. Way to participate. Thank you. Does it make sense to you? So now we have our transitions that easily get us in the way. Amanda, I have to say the central idea every time? Yes. Does it have to be the exact same way? No. If you wouldn't say it like that, don't say it like that. Say, for you to understand this social rhetoric concept, how it relates to the artifact, let's talk about building community. You can say it however you would talk, as long as you have those three ideas. It doesn't have to sound as robotic or mechanical. I would naturally speak in that way because that is my style. You may not, but make sure that you have those 3 points. Where does the transition go? Well, if you'll note, in this format, it goes before every single main point. But Amanda, I just gave the thesis. Don't they know already? No, they don't. Give that transition and then go into the first main point. Let's begin by looking at how it builds community so you can understand this artifact and its fulfillment of social rhetoric. And then you go into the bulk of the speech. So what is that bulk of this speech, you ask? Well, I suggest that you go and watch those 2 videos about the content of this speech. But in essence, what we're going to do here, and I can break this down for you, is that you will have main point number 1. The first thing that you may want to do is describe main point number 1, an example or description of that point. What does that mean? I would suggest that you define what it means to build community, right? Take it straight from your text. You can reword it in your own way. You can look to other resources on the internet about rhetoric and how it builds community and maybe utilize some ideas from there. But an idea would be to start out with the definition and the description that you were going to try to justify. Then, what you will do is you will give some specific examples from the artifact. As you can see in my artifact, right, it has this language, it has this image, it has this argument. It will be very important for you to remember this idea of symbols, something that means something else, or it could be including language, right? What is rhetoric or persuasion, right? That inherent energy. It's communicated through signs, including language. So anything on the artifact is fair game as justification as to why or how it does that social function. For example, if I was to go to this first, for example, my cousin runs a business called the Art Grist. And at the Art Grist, they have a club every Wednesday called Girls Club. And it's for middle school girls to come and create artistic projects. Through the artistic projects, they learn about women who have contributed to society. And they also learn about women through the form of art. So they'll usually create art projects that revolve around them. But while they are there, they will talk about issues that affect everyday middle schoolers, the oppression, the harassment, the bullying, etc. that goes on with girls in society today. So they have these handy posters that they use to promote Girls Club. Excuse me, hi, I just wanted to let you know that I'm not going to smile, act dumb, hide my body, pretend, lie, or be silent for you. And that everything I do for me. And I'm not going to let you laugh at me, make fun of me, harass me, abuse me, or rape me anymore. Because I am a girl, and me and my girlfriends are not afraid of you. This is a response to the continued harassment and fear that revolves around. So in the essence of building community, what we could say first is we could go into our first main points. First, I'll tell you about how it defines community so you can understand how it fulfills the definition of social rhetoric. Building community, as displayed by Rhetoric on page, you don't even have to say the page, as described in the by Rhetoric, suggests that quote, and then you can give the definition. Then you can say, we can see in my artifact how this also builds community. There are uses of a couple things. First and foremost, it uses community by saying me, I, we, my girlfriends. This can build an idea. Second, it builds on an issue that is outstanding in the community, which is a need for girls to come and have a place where they feel that they don't have to be a typical standard or socialized norm of what society expects them to be, that they can be outside of that. And through something like Girls Club and through this particular rhetoric, they see that there's an option to do so. And by that, they can go and they can be with others who are also like-minded and begin to perpetuate an idea of positivity, one that does not allow for women to become oppressed in society, and one that allows them to be them because they have partners in unity. As it says here at the end, me and my girlfriends aren't afraid of you. So it creates that essence of community. And that's why it defines this concept of building community and fulfills that function of social rhetoric. Does that make sense to you? So if we go back and we look at what these main points each do you have to have an example or a description example? No. What you can do is very easily lay out the definition, give your examples in your detail, show how that fits back into the definition of social rhetoric, and then end your day. Do not forget to ground it in the concept of the definition, though. For example, I always say this when I do my introduction speeches in my public speaking class, something like, I'll let you get to know me by talking about my family. And then people will go in and they'll be like, so my dad's name is Jack, and he works, he was a police officer, but he retired, and now he works for a man doing property management on 6 of his different houses. I hope that helped you get to know me better. What did it help you get to know?
Her dad, but not herself.
Absolutely. We tend to describe things, but we forget why we're describing it. What is your purpose of talking to me about font, about language, about the message that are seen in your artifact? To prove that it what? Fulfills the function of, say it out loud, social rhetoric. Thank you so much. Absolutely. So it fulfills that for us. So don't forget to go back and incorporate that in. Does that make sense to y'all? Awesome. You'll do that for each and every single main point, giving a transition before each one. And the last thing that you are going to go into, actually, let me move this back, is your conclusion. All speeches must have a conclusion. People love to drag out this conclusion. Okay, people do 2 things. Either one, they tend to drag out a conclusion very much. When we say the words in conclusion, that means wrap it up. I'm sure that you've been in a speech before where somebody's like, so in conclusion, and then 5 minutes later they're still going and you're like, I thought this thing was over. And when a teacher says, all right, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, but then that goes on for an hour, you're like, oh, I thought this was over. People check out that moment that you draw to a close. So your job in a conclusion literally is to recap and get out of there. Don't ever add new information, but also don't throw it off as something that isn't important, because that's the second thing that people will do with a conclusion. They'll be like, so that's it. No. Let's draw us back to a close. Remind us of what we talked about. So this is what you need to do. You need to have a signpost, so something like, to conclude, finally, in closing today, to summarize what we spoke about, whatever sounds natural to you. Then you're going to repeat your thesis. In closing today, I talked to you a little bit about this artifact here from the art grist. I talked to you about how it fulfills the functions of social rhetoric by describing its relation to building community, as well as how it shapes knowledge, right? And then what you can do is you can go back to, or you must go back to, your attention getter. What did we learn at the beginning of this presentation? Or what did we use at the beginning as your attention getter? That now at the end, we have all this information and we can relate it back in. We like to tie everything up in a nice little bow and relate it back. Bring it all full circle. If I said something like, so today I told you about my dog and my love for food tasting so that you could get to know me better. I hope that the next time somebody brings up the concept of thrill-seeking, you don't have to think about it in terms of jumping out of a plane or bungee jumping anymore, but instead you can think about it as taking steps out of your own comfort zone to start your new adventure like I do in the simplistic activity of trying new foods. Does that make sense? Good. So we've then drawn it all back together again and tied it up with a bow. This is the format and the structure that you will be using for this speech. You have 2 to 3 minutes to deliver it. I encourage you to practice on your timing. As a note, the introduction of this speech should be about 30 seconds at most. The body of this speech is going to be, well, we'll tell you, if the conclusion is 20 to 30 seconds, and the introduction is 20 to 30 seconds, and you have 2 to 3 minutes, and you have 2 to 3 main points, we need to start balancing it in that way. So you'll have about 2 minutes here to deliver, and that means, do I want to spend a minute on one main point and a minute on another, or do I want to divide that up evenly? Make sure that you have some kind of balance. If your third main point is one that is super small and doesn't have a lot of detail or description, I'd drop that, because we are very clear in hearing when something doesn't balance well in public speaking. Unlike English class, where it's like, oh, that's a crappy point, I'll shove that one in the middle, nobody will ever notice. We notice in public speaking. So I would encourage you to drop it altogether, seeing as how you only have to have 2 to 3 main points. Make sure that you're timing yourself, and if you are going over, think about dropping a point, dropping an example, seeing what's different. If you plan on showing a clip or a video at the beginning of your class, at the beginning of the presentation, you'll hear in the visual aids presentation that it's typically 30 seconds is the max, but that's for a 5 to 7 minute speech. Because you have such a small amount of time to be speaking, I would encourage you to only use 15 seconds worth of a clip or a song. Does that make sense? The highlighted part that you want to analyze for the purpose of persuasive social rhetoric. Because it's true, as we know, that small parts of a song can develop and take on their own right, or particular parts of a music video become the most talked about and pervasive. That's something to keep in mind. Do any of you have any other questions about this idea, the format, the process, the delivery aspects, how to practice, how to prepare, what to bring in? All right. You are more than welcome to email me your full speech, if you would like to, for review. You can do so up until 5 o'clock Monday evening, as that will give you enough time to get your revisions done. And then it's always 5 o'clock before the day that you speak, so that you know for the future. Again, what do you need to turn into me? Only the evaluation sheet. Absolutely. You do not need to write out anything in full or give it to me. Any other questions? All right, thanks, y'all, for sticking around. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll send you all an email with these links.